This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So fast to finger down. Dance tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate Rewind and Rewatch, covering Enter the Dragon 2011, the second anniversary celebration, which was on June 5th, 2011 from BB King's Blues Club Bar and Grill in New York City, New York. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed or on our own dedicated RSS feed on all podcast platforms and applications. If you'd like to donate to the show, there's no obligation. You just click the link on the show notes, and I'll take you to Red Circle where you could do a one-time or reoccurring donation. You can follow us on Twitter at OpenVoiceGate. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined as always by my co-host, Case Lowe. And not to peel back the curtain from last week's episode, but got everything going from like how we were doing our weekly update this time, and I think that the computer gremlins are not going to be attacking us for this week's show.
We did run into a mountain of technological issues last week, which I think Mike and I typically have very good luck in that we sit down to record this podcast, and the podcast records. And that is pretty much the only, that's the process we know is the process that works. Last week, maybe not so much. Maybe we were up late into the night talking about Dragon Gate USA, but that's okay because it's me and Mike Spears, and it's the second year anniversary celebration of Dragon Gate USA. We have watched 2 full years of this promotion. We have seen it shift and morph and transform into something different from how it started. Whether or not that difference is good, jury is, still out, but I think we're about to make our decision as to like, oh man, this is Dragon Gate USA now. Okay, it's been a tough triple shot so far. I think the first 2 shows, while not offensively bad, were definitely that like, oh my god, like things have changed. Jon Moxley isn't here. There's not really that many Japanese guys on these shows. I will say up top, and we got a lot to get into before we talk about the second anniversary show, but up top, this was a fine show. I enjoyed most of this show. And Mike, I don't know how you feel about it. So up top, kind of big picture on the second year anniversary.
They ended the weekend a lot stronger than they began it. We went through like 2 weeks of shows that at a certain point, it was the big moment of what are we doing here? But this show, Enter the Dragon 2011, the second anniversary show, I felt like that it started off hot and then ended pretty well. There was some stuff in between that we'll get into, but I won't say that they've pulled themselves out of the tailspin, but I'll say that they've at least like leveled out after the show. Like this is the one thing that like they could have been full on tailspin after the show and have 3 terrible shows back to back to back, but they at least like were able to stabilize it. And it's something that when we get into the show itself, comparing the second anniversary to the first anniversary show pretty much gives you an idea of how drastically the company has changed for better and for a lot of ways just worse.
Yeah, it's a tough, those 2 cards, looking at them at the same time, that's a tough thing to digest of like, oh, this is not 7 years apart, this is only 1 year apart. I don't think the last 12 months were too kind to this company, at least from a business perspective. Now there's almost, there's 0 newswire notes to get into on the show, but we are in the summer months of 2011 at this point, and we do need to shape what is going on outside of the Dragon Gate USA universe. Last week, we talked all about Dragon Gate in Japan. We did a really deep dive on the beginnings of Junction 3 and the continued dominance of Blood Warriors. This week, we are going around the U.S. independents, as this time in 2011, literally game-changing stuff that would occur. And it starts with a Japanese promotion running in America, May 13th, 14th, and 15th. We had the New Japan Invasion Tour 2011 attack on the East Coast. Mike, I'll read you all three of these cards. Let's start with the first show, May 13th, Rahway Rec Center, Rahway, New Jersey. Opening match, Homicide and Low Key defeating Jushin Thunder Liger and Tiger Mask. Satoshi Kojima defeating Kenny Omega. Apollo 55, Giant Bernard and Carl Anderson defeating Gedo, Jado, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Davey Richards, who we'll be hearing a lot about this afternoon, or on this podcast this afternoon. It's 8:30. I don't know why I said this afternoon. There's an IWGP Intercontinental title tournament going on at this show to crown the white belt. The first IWGP Intercontinental Champion, Yujiro Takahashi defeating Hideo Saito, who became Captain New Japan later. Tetsuya Naito defeating Northeast Indie guy Josh Daniels. Toru Yano defeating Dan Moth. MVP defeating Kazuchika Okada. And the main event of the first New Japan in America show, Charlie Haas and Rhino defeating Hiroshi Tanahashi and Togi Makabe.
You know, this first show is in Rahway. Like, you have to start the show in Rahway with some combination of Low Key and Homicide. Like, like saying, like, what are we doing here? What are you doing running in New Jersey with Jersey All Pro if you're not going to have that? But it's really, like, as we go through, like, this weekend of stuff, like, this is kind of the thing that, at least with, like, the New Japan, like, expansion, and this is kind of the start. This is the start of it, really. Like, this is before Bushiroad bought the company. This is still under Yuke's ownership, but this is, like, their first foray, and it's kind of interesting looking at this. Like, Kenny Omega was not a New Japan guy, even though he faced Satoshi Kojima on this. So he was a big Jersey All-Pro guy even before he went to FCW or Deep South. So it's an interesting first show, and it just gets even more wild as we get into, like, New York and Philadelphia.
Yeah, so what follows is a show from Basketball City on May 14th, 2011, which opens with Kenny Omega versus Josh Daniels. There is a six-man tag with Dan Moff, Jushin Thunder Liger, and Tiger Mask defeating Gedo, Jado, and Shinsuke Nakamura. Giant Bernard and Carl Anderson, they defeat Hideo Sato and Satoshi Kojima. Another six-man tag, this one, Davey Richards, Homicide, and Rhino defeating Kazuchika Okada, Ryusuke Taguchi, and Togi Makabe. An IWGP Junior Heavyweight title match between Prince Devitt and Loki. I would love to see that, but it is not on New Japan World. The semifinals of the IWGP Intercontinental title tournament, Toru Yano defeating Yujiro Takahashi, and MVP defeating Tetsuya Naito. And your main event, this match is on New Japan World. IWGP Heavyweight title match, Hiroshi Tanahashi defending against Charlie Haas.
Man, like, I know there might have been, like, an IWGP title match at Madison Square Garden when they had the WWE affiliation, but, like, just like that little thing of, Hiroshi Tanahashi's first ever title match in the United States was against Charlie Haas. That's just one of those things you, like, look at and you're like, what are we doing here? Like,
it's
I guess I'm already saying
trivia
this.
Question, because Charlie Haas, like, we'll talk about it later when we talk about Ring of Honor, but this is world's greatest tag team coming to the independents. You know, is Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, are they going to go to Japan? Like, they were a thing on top of the decade-long rumor of will Shelton Benjamin and or Carlito return at the Royal Rumble. We are also now in that period of history where that was a rumor every single year. But Tanahashi comes to America, Basketball City, and he defends the belt against Charlie Haas. That is insane to think about.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, Basketball City was like an ROH stand too. I mean, that's where they had the Jin Nex versus NBC Cage Warfare match. Like, it's just like this is very much like, if you're going to be running like your first weekend of shows in the United States, you're doing the Northeast, it makes sense every place that they've run. And I mean, the idea that Basketball City, which I don't even think exists anymore, hosted the first ever Tanahashi or IWGP Heavyweight title match in the United States is wild. Or the first time it was ever defended in the United States in the modern era.
And then from there, the Triple Shot closes at the Asylum Arena in Philly on May 15th, 2011. Tetsuya Naito defeating Hideo Saito. Gato, Jado, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Yujiro defeating Charlie Haas, Josh Daniels, Kazuchika Okada, and Tiger Mask. Jersey All-Pro Light Heavyweight title match. Kenny Omega defeats Jushin Thunder Liger to gain the title. Liger came in as the champion. Bad Intentions of Bernard and Anderson. They defeat Dan Boff and Satoshi Kojima. That match sounds decent. The next match,
yeah, I'd be interested in that one.
the next match is phenomenal. Apollo 55 defending the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Titles against Homicide and Low-Ki. And then after that, in this match is on New Japan World, Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Davey Richards in 2011. Sign me up. And then the card concludes with the finals of the IWGP Intercontinental title tournament. This is also on World MVP defeating Toru Yano in a 9-minute, I'm sure, abomination of a match. And then the main event of the triple shot, the finale of New Japan in America, street fight between Togi Makabe and Rhino.
It wasn't King of Destroyer?
It just says street fight on here.
Man, I mean, 3 years later, that would be a Tokyo Dome King of Destroyer match if I ever heard of one. So yeah, it's interesting, like, bringing this up here because we already have now DGUSA did not run Philadelphia for the first time for their anniversary show, and less than 4 weeks beforehand, you have what was considered. I mean, 2011, it was such a mess in Japan, but you'd have New Japan now making their first tour, and they're hitting up New Jersey, they're hitting up New York City, and they hit up Philadelphia, and they hit up the arena. So this is like a real like intersection and divergence point of at least DGUSA and New Japan, but also in a lot of ways kind of like New Japan and Dragon Gate, because I think it was 2012 that Bushiroad bought the company. So I mean, last days of Ukes in a lot of ways.
Yeah, those shows, and again, there's only 3 matches for the entire weekend up on New Japan World, and unfortunately, none of them involve Low-Ki, although we do get the Davey Richards versus Tanahashi match. But those shows, I mean, I get it, they're 9 years old at this point. They probably should feel a little dated, but between, obviously, the amount of focus on Davey Richards and Low-Ki and Homicide, and then Charlie Haas, and then Okada is just a guy on those shows, it's such a mind-blowing thing to look at, and you're exactly right. They run the arena. Supposedly, they drew 1,500 to that show, and
impossible. Just saying, impossible. I mean, they said 1,800 in Rawway, which, yeah, and 2,500 in Basketball City. It wasn't just Dragon Gate USA working numbers back at this point, people.
It's one of those things where, suddenly, and it's not like, this tour had any legs. I believe, at least internally in New Japan, this tour was looked at as a failure. Now, I could be wrong, but that's my understanding of it. It is one of those things where all of a sudden, there's a little bit of competition. Now, Gabe cannot just rely on, well, we have the Japanese guys, because that's proven not to draw. And now, even if the attendance numbers are drastically inflated, there's other people doing that in his home territory. So it's just something to monitor, I think, as we go along, especially as we hit 2012. And until we conclude this series, there's going to be more New Japan updates because I think they matter into the wrestling context. Now, we obviously talked about Homicide on those shows. Homicide was somebody who worked Dragon Gate USA and then left to work some combination of Ring of Honor, and came back to TNA at some point. It's not the only time Dragon Gate USA has lost someone to TNA. Obviously, the Young Bucks left at the first WrestleMania weekend show, so they've been gone about 16 months now, and if you're wondering how they are doing at this time, on an episode of Impact that was taped May 16th, 2011, Generation Me lost a 6-minute tag team match to Matt Hardy and Eric Bischoff. Mike Spears, any recollection of the Eric Bischoff-Matt Hardy tag team?
I didn't know it actually happened.
Nor did I. I was expecting bad news when I looked at the Generation B cage match, and somehow it came across worse than I even expected it to.
Yeah, that's just insane.
That is most people that are drawing in air quotes, drawing in wrestling right now, at some point trickled through TNA, and it's
sure.
They didn't work out there not because they're not talented. And it's just a continuous clown show for 20 years at this point.
And if you listen to the Bucks and what they've said after, TNA basically had them on the brink of quitting wrestling. So, a lot of people say like it's a finishing school. Maybe you could say that over the last 18 months, but when you look back, at least through like the deep and rich history of TNA, not necessarily the case. So,
it's just a pity. But luckily, back on the independent scene, what is the month here? April 19th, 2011. Evolve 7 Aries versus Moxley at BB King's Bar and Grill, the same venue we're at here, but this is in April, the final independent wrestling show for Jon Moxley, on a show that featured Shima Zion versus Jimmy Jacobs, Silas Young versus Tony Nese, Johnny Gargano versus John Davis, a Chikara Sekigun tag of Frightmare and Jigsaw. They defeat Facade, who we'll have to talk about later on in this show, and Jason Gorey. Zack Sabre Jr. makes his Evolve debut as he wrestles Sami Callihan on that show. A.R. Fox defeated Rich Swann. Chuck Taylor defeated Akira Tozawa in his only Evolve appearance. And then Johnny Gargano defeated Chuck Taylor. They both pulled double duty on that show. And then the main event, Austin Aries defeated Jon Moxley as Moxley left the independent scene.
And I believe this was Evolve's iPay-per-view debut. So
I believe that is correct.
So like you look at this and boy, like I know that there's a lot of matches under 10 minutes here, but that's a stiff card to put up there, and especially with some of these matches that we have on this. But yeah, no, this is Jon Moxley's debut. Just to bring out a quote from the Observer that comes a couple weeks later from this. And I had this pulled up a second ago, but then I scrolled up because we were talking about something else. It is announced that Jon Moxley is reporting to FCW. And Case, let me go through some people who are in his class here, because
please.
This is going to be a trip for this. So this was still in FCW days. So this is coming from the Observer that was is the same Observer that we're going to talk about in a little bit because there's a lot of quotes from it. It comes from the May 30th Observer. So this is his last independent show, but he does not report for another month. But it's worth ducking in here and talking about this. So a couple of newcomers to FCW at this time. Jonathan Good, a.k.a. Jon Moxley, who won't be keeping that name given that that's his real name. Ethan Levin, a 6'6", 270-pound Israeli who's billed as a self-made millionaire diamond wholesaler. Alexander Rusev, a 6-foot flat 305-pounder who's put together like a tank. Looks like one of the guys who's in the world's strongest man stuff you see on ESPN too. Ted DiBiase's son, Brett DiBiase, who is no longer wrestling but is now a referee. He's in the news today, by the way. I don't know how much you've kept up on the DiBiase brothers about FBI lately, Case, but both
was it
DiBiase.
Him or was it Ted Jr. or was it both?
Both.
Oh,
it was
fantastic.
Brett. It was Brett, but now they're looking at Ted.
Go ahead. I did not know that.
And then here's another thing. I'm quoting this verbatim from Dave Meltzer from the May 30th, 2011 Wrestling Observer newsletter. They also have 2 women. One is named Audrey Marie, and she looks a whole lot like Carrie Vera. It's not her, but there's a resemblance. The other is named Eden Styles, who looks like a fitness competitor with the abs and muscularity and fake big boobs. Dave, even 9 years ago, not really having a lot of tact about someone who would now be known as Brandy Rhodes.
That's funny just because like the name Audrey Marie really sticks out to me as someone that I remember pre-WWE Network NXT when I was watching the shows religiously through Hulu.
The Sunshine Network at FCW.
Yes, that sort of era of late FCW, early NXT, which I watched so much of. Audrey Marie was a name that for some reason had value to a lot of people. Like, look, like Future of the Divas, Audrey Marie right here. And then for so long, I remember the rumor being that she was going to be in the Wyatt family as the proverbial Sister Abigail, which
right.
my understanding is they are still, like now, I guess Alexa Bliss is doing a thing with The Fiend. Don't know, don't really pay attention. But it's nice to know that 9 years later, they are still trying to make Sister Abigail a thing. But I remember that always being the deal with Audrey Marie. So it's interesting to see her in this class where Rusev and Moxley obviously were these standouts, and rightfully so.
Yeah, like that's like a stereotypical FCW ass signing class right there. You have a son of a wrestler. You have 2 people who actually ended up becoming like big main roster mainstays. Brandy Rhodes, who's now the chief branding officer of another company, and then having someone that you're going to give an Israeli self-made millionaire diamond wholesaler gimmick. And you know that's very much FCW. So I thought that was a nice way for us to tie up, you know, the entire thing of Moxley. But we still have one more Evolve show to talk about. And one of the more famous Evolve shows, Case. I think you have everything pulled up as we first have our first ever Evolve style battle.
Oh, who could forget the style battle? May 20th, 2011. Put it in your calendar as a day in history. From Union City, New Jersey at the famed Ace Arena. We have style battle at Evolve 8. Mike, the styles included in this tournament, each representing a different style of professional wrestling. We have AR Fox, who's representing high flying. We have Austin Aries, who's representing hybrid style. We have Bobby Fish, the Purorisu Jr. heavyweight style. Brody Lee is a super heavyweight. John Davis is representing power style. Sami Callihan is hard-hitting. Tony Nese, despite the fact that he is known for having a 450 splash, his style is standing combat. And Rich Swann is representing Rich Swann style.
Just like, all right. Like, this is Gabe at his most Gabe. Like, first off, like, Austin Aries being hybrid style, hard-hitting style, and power style. Aren't they the same thing? Standing combat style with knees. Like, what the fuck are we even doing here? But, like, it does seem like 3 of them he was dead on about. Air Fox is a high flyer, Brody Lee is a super heavyweight, and Rich Swann is Swann style. I mean, there's no better way to phrase it.
Oh, God, I love this so much. Every single style battle has delivered in their own special way. And this kicks so much ass because, like you said, 3 of them, fine. Those make sense. John Davis being power. Sami Callihan, I guess, being hard-hitting. I mean, I think he was known more for being like a hardcore guy.
Yeah.
Which could have made that tournament more interesting. And then again, Tony Nese, known for having a 450 splash, standing combat. So that tournament was something else. I mean, it's something else. It's on a show where you have these first-round tournament matches, most notably Bobby Fish versus Austin Aries, Sami Callihan versus Brody Lee, and AR Fox versus Rich Swann. You also have the SATs on this show defeating Alex Colon and Ricky Reyes, and then an 8-way fray match, so you see some brand synergy there between Dragon Gate USA and Evolve, with Pinkie Sanchez coming out on top, and a match that would feature Atu, who we'll talk about later on in this show, Blaine Rage, Brian XL, Cheech Hernandez, Derek Rise, Corey Chavis, and Scott Reed. And then the finals of the first ever style battle tournament, AR Fox representing the high-flying style, defeating Sami Callihan of the hard-hitting style.
As he should. I just...
right side of
history there. I had to look up to see that Blaine Rage was not a misspelling. Blaine Rage is still wrestling today. So, in Florida, wrestling in Florida, you know, it's Florida wrestling. But yeah, Brian XL and Cheech Hernandez on the same match. Like, that's wild in its own right. And then I thought Corey Chavis has kind of disappeared from the Gabe verse after Dark City Fight Club had like their one match together, and that was it. But he made appearance here. Derek Rise, I want to say Derek Rise was a GCW guy. I'm not positive. Oh, Derek Rise makes an appearance later on in Evolve shows, and actually Evolve shows of the time period at DGUSA. Oh, he's a DGUSA future veteran.
Yeah, I've seen him on DGUSA shows. The name Derek Rise did not trip me up, Mike. I am well versed in the Derek Rise verse.
Yeah. Oh no, we're gonna be talking about him very soon. Jeez, I apologize. We'll be talking about Derek Rise next Triple Shot weekend. That's on me. I failed us on that. But however, Blaine Rage, what a name! Blaine Rage was a former. And this title just sounds insane. I found out what the company name is first. It's the former Go Wrestle Powerweight Champion.
How is a powerweight not at the style battle tournament? Are you kidding me?
I mean, he also fought for the Go Wrestle. He is also a former Go Wrestler Speedweight Champion.
Why does Go Wrestling have a better idea of what Style Battle is than Gabe Sapolsky does? Style Battle now looks like a bigger failure than it should be, all because of the Go Wrestling lineage.
Yeah, and they also have an open weight champion. So you have a power weight and a speed weight and then an open weight. Like they have it figured out here in Daytona Beach. God, that I'm clicking on their Twitter page because now I'm incredibly amused. Just upper. Oh God, like this is some real like. This is some shit. I'm just looking at this right now. Okay, so everyone go visit at _go wrestle. This might be like the next like NWA Mountain State. Just looking at it, it is insane.
This is what's the at _go wrestle?
At _go wrestle. They only have 230 followers.
And the only person that I follow that also follows them is IWA Mid-South, which is a reflection
on
the company as much as it is myself.
Yes, very much on you. But Blaine Rage is going to be... I don't think Blaine Rage ever does another DG or another Gabe-verse thing. I'm going to make sure of this because I don't want to be speaking out of turn here.
The green screen on GoWrestle.com is insane.
Yes. Oh, no. Blaine Rage is defeated by the Man Scout Jake Manning at Evolve 16 Davis versus Fish in Jacksonville, Florida.
Thank God we are not doing an Evolve rewatch. Thank God.
And would it surprise you that is a part of the second annual Style Battle Weekend round robin challenge?
What? I mean, look, he seems like a nice guy, but what style is Jake Manning doing other than shitty professional wrestler? Is that his style? Nice guy. Love the High Spots Network. An abysmal wrestler.
I mean, I've seen my fair share of Man Scout matches being where I live. So I'm not, you're not wrong. I'll say that much. You are not wrong. So that's what was going on in Evolve. Evolve was wild at this time. Evolve just deciding to have style battles, having Swan style. Like they just were, Gabe was feeling himself that week. It's not as bad as the Sable Shootout where match 3, actually this is 2 matches, but...
It's simple. There's 3 matches. Actually, there's 2. It's actually 4. Oh my God. Gabe in 2011 is, as the kids say, on one.
Yeah. But that's not all that was happening in the landscape, though, kids. There's a lot going on.
No, please go ahead. Yeah, well, there's 3 PWG shows to talk about because they all involve Akira Tozawa, and we start off with April 9th, 2011, Card Subject to Change 3, a show that, Mike, if you could put yourself in the April 2011 stratosphere for a second, there was one man that was dominating pop culture headlines, and that man was Charlie Sheen. And the story goes that Excalibur was pushed and pushed and pushed to title this show winning. And Excalibur refused, again, right side of history, and came out with Card Subject to Change 3, a show from the American Legion Post that featured Johnny Yuma versus Peter Avalon, Candice LeRae versus my favorite women's wrestler of all time, Portia Perez, Roderick Strong versus Willie Mack, and what is Willie Mack's coming out party. Akira Tozawa, who was on a bit of a path of dominance in PWG, well, no amount of momentum is strong enough to outlast the wrath that is Low-Ki. Low-Ki defeats Akira Tozawa. Johnny Goodtime defeats New Japan USA's Ryan Taylor. A PWG World title match between Claudio Castagnoli and Redacted. And then the main event, PWG World Tag Team title match, the Young Bucks defeating El Generico, and it was supposed to be Paul London. Paul London did not make it. Who shows up in his place? None other than Ricochet, the main event of Card Subject to Change 3, the Young Bucks, who a month later would lose to Matt Hardy and Eric Bischoff on TV. In PWG, they defeat El Generico and Ricochet for the PWG tag team titles.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the times that Paul London was starting to kind of dip out of wrestling. So
very much so.
Yeah. The Peligro Abejas, which means Danger Beast, was the tag team name. And no, I do remember this Low-Ki match. I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, it's going to be a character Tozawa versus Low-Ki. That's going to be dope. It's going to, Tozawa and Low-Ki, that's your role. Then it's like Low-Ki on his bullshit in this match.
It's, of the golden era of PWG, which honestly you could argue starts in September of 2009 at the Danielson Farewell show that also has the Dragon Gate guys on it. This is one of the few shows that you can look at and go, you know what? that one wasn't great. This is not a great PWG show. But what follows at the end of May 27th, May 28th, All-Star Weekend 8, Night 1 is Willie Mack defeating Kevin Steen in the opener. The Dynasty of Scorpio Sky and Redacted defeating the Fight and Taylor Boys of Brian Cage Taylor and Ryan Taylor. Chuck Taylor defeated Kenny King. This is the match that Chuck Taylor injured himself. This is why Chuck Taylor was not on this triple shot show that we've been discussing. The World Tag Team titles are on the line. The Young Bucks defeating the Rock Ness Monsters. Austin Aries and Roderick Strong defeating the Cutler Brothers. Eddie Edwards defeating Alex Shelley. The Nightmare Violence Collection of Akira Tozawa and Kevin Steen defeating El Generico and Ricochet. And the main event, the world title match, where the top rope breaks in a 40-minute classic, Claudio Castagnoli defeating Chris Hero. Mike, the thing on this show, Tozawa and Steen versus Generico and Ricochet, one of the all-time great American tag team matches.
Yeah, this is, again, if Dave was watching PWG this time, this probably was a 5-star match.
Oh my God! It's almost a 5-star match for me. It's 4 3/4 with. It's just not 5. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not 5. But it is so close to being perfect.
It's like what the Supreme Court says about obscenity. When you see a 5-star match, you'll know it. But no, this is actually like a great PWG card. I mean, after you get, what you should do is watch Willie Mack versus Kevin Steen. Skip over the next 2 matches and pick up.
hit the old skip button.
Just tap that twice, and then you have the Rock Ness Monsters were as a house team, they were different, and they weren't at the level of everyone else. But this was a fun match. The Bucks worked around that. And then Jin Nex versus Cutler Brothers is a good time. Edwards and Shelley, that's a match that is. It's not as great as you think it could be, but it's a very fun match. And then Claudio and Chris Hero for 41 minutes working around that kind of match. That's an insane match. This weekend of shows, and this is just night 1 of this, was already great stuff.
Yeah, I love that main event just because it's not even the best singles match those two would have, but it's one of those where, given the circumstances they're dealt and the fact that they still go 40 minutes, it's a testament to just how good both of those guys are. And to follow the tag match, which, no fault of Hero and Claudio, the tag match blew them out of the water, but the main event was still really good.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was an era that, really started. I mean, you had at least 3 4-star matches on the show. One match on that show that could have been a 5-star match and could have been, a top 5 match in the Wrestling Observer Match of the Year poll.
Night 2, All-Star Weekend 8, Night 2, Kenny King defeats Brian Cage Taylor. Akira Tozawa and Kevin Steen, they defeat the Rock Ness Monsters. Ricochet defeats Willie Mack in a match that I remember really enjoying. The Cutler Brothers fall to the Dynasty. Eddie Edwards defeats El Generico. The Young Bucks defeat Austin Aries and Roderick Strong. Young Bucks versus Generation Next in a dream match of sorts. This would be Akira Tozawa's farewell from being in the promotion full-time. So not only does he wrestle the Rock Ness Monsters in the semi-main event, he wrestles Chris Hero, and he defeats Chris Hero to send him back to Japan, a triumphant man. In the main event, another match with a lot of lore around it, given that Kevin Steen has been pretty vocal about the fact that Low-Ki did not want to do the job to Claudio Castagnoli, but he was talked into it. Main event, Claudio defeats Low-Ki in 20 minutes in just a bananas match, because you can tell Low-Ki is not happy to be there, but it's still Low-Ki and Claudio, so it's still really good.
Yeah, so the big story about this show was that Chris Hero was not booked on this show, and it's kind of why is Chris Hero not booked on the show when the full lineup was out there? And then right after, a Nightmare Violence Collection versus Rock Ness Monsters, Chris Hero comes out, and of course, Chris Hero versus Akira Tozawa from the previous years, the Battle of Los Angeles, was the match that put Tozawa on the map. It still probably is the best match to ever happen at the American Legion Hall. And they said, and Hero came out there and says, so you had a good match, but I think you have one more in you. And he got the pin on Hero during DDT4, and they decided to have this match. And, it is an incredibly emotional match. I'm not very someone that really taps into emotion of wrestling in a lot of ways. There's some moments that do, but this match just drips of it. And then, Akira Tozawa basically wrestled an hour over the 2 nights and finally puts away like really his true rival on this excursion and goes home. And there's a reason why whenever Tozawa wrestled in the States before WWE, he said he was from Huntington Beach or Reseda, because this was like his home. And then of course, like the Young Bucks being shitheads at this time tried to attack them during this, and then they fought them off.
I completely forgot about the Huntington Beach bad boy Akira Tozawa. That is a good memory of Tozawa saying he's from Huntington Beach. I don't know why that always made me laugh, but it
owns.
It's great. Well, Chris Hero has one hell of a 2011, and he has that great weekend at PWG, and then we transition to Ring of Honor, who from WrestleMania weekend through, we'll end up talking about the end of June. The shows that they had were not terrific. There's one show in particular that I'll mention from May 7th, 2011, ROH Revolution Canada, which had Claudio versus Kyle O'Reilly in the opener, a Davey Richards versus Kenny King match, which I guarantee was touted as the future of Ring of Honor, because that is what happened every time those two guys were in the ring with one another. But the show was notable for 2 matches. One, the Colt Cabana versus Delirious Larry Sweeney tribute match. We talked about Larry Sweeney 2 episodes ago. Cabana and Delirious had a great comedy match there. But then the main event of this show, talk about emotions in wrestling. Chris Hero challenged for the Ring of Honor World title against Eddie Edwards in an unheralded classic, because this is kind of a dead period for Ring of Honor. It's post-Final Battle 2010. We'll talk about the structural changes that occurred in the company in just a second. This Edwards versus Hero match unfortunately gets lost due to a number of factors, but it is one of the all-time great Ring of Honor World title matches.
Yeah, and from a period that a lot of things are changing, and, Hero, like, I know he talks about his 2015, but his 2011, I mean, if we're...
Oof, man.
I mean, like, that would be, like, a fun, like shoot tape or like something to have. Sit down to Chris Hero and go like, all right, you've talked about 2015 with Rob Naylor. That's a great thing on High Spots Network worth watching if you haven't seen it before. Let's talk about your 2010 to 2011, because it's such an insane time.
And with that, Mike, we go to the June 2nd, 2011 Figure 4 Weekly, where Brian Alvarez writes, the major announcement that would change ROH forever was the sale of the company to Sinclair Broadcasting, a TV company that owns stations covering 22% of the United States, mostly in secondary markets. The deal will include a new television show that starts this fall, with the first 4-episode taping taking place in August in Chicago Ridge. The hope is that the TV show, which will air on Saturday nights, will do ratings decent enough that they can syndicate the show to non-Sinclair markets. Most of the people affiliated with the company will remain in their current roles, including Jim Cornette and Delirious on creative. They will be using all the wrestlers currently under contract, introducing them to the new audience over the next several months as if they are all new stars. The television will do slow build towards iPay-per-views, 2 over WrestleMania weekend, as has become the tradition, and then 3 others throughout the year. They're doing the opposite of what Dragon Gate USA is doing, in the sense that DGUSA is making all of their shows and Evolve shows pay-per-view events, whereas ROH feels that only doing 5, basically 4 because 2 are back-to-back on a single weekend, makes each event more special. Of course, the difference is that ROH has TV to build up their pay-per-views, and Dragon Gate USA does not. How big of a success or failure this will be is yet to be determined. So 9 years ago, Mike, ROH became Sinclair property, and to this day, they are still Sinclair property.
Yeah, and there's really like 2 big things to talk about with this. First, the reason why the sale happened, and I know now Kerry Silkin has a podcast where he's talked about like some things about ROH that really weren't talked about before. And for Silkin, after he bought the promotion from Fine Scene and Gentry, it was a money loser. Like, it was a promotion that, I mean, like, that was one of the reasons why Gabe got ousted in 08. It was a company that, like, he was losing a lot of money, and that he was like, I'm not confident in your vision anymore. So he pivoted again. Then he had the HCNet thing, which, as, like, later on they talk about, was, like, HCNet, like, extremely limited, and there was no evidence that HCNet increased business that much. So it was getting it, like, to the end of the string. I do remember something I might be, like, paraphrasing this, but Case, do you know what was the one weekend that Kerry Silkin said Ring of Honor was in the black after the weekend, was not relying on DVD sales post show.
Oh, I do not actually.
It was WrestleMania week in 2006.
Which was headlined by what match?
Just a 6 guys. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're in 2 different teams. One is called like Do Fixer, I believe. Yeah, and it had this guy Dragon Kid, and then the other team had like, oh geez, it was a gross name. It was like Generation of Blood Generation. That's it. Yeah, no, that's the only weekend he said that they made money at the venue and didn't make things back on DVD. And then even like the DVD sales, like they would, like the talk was like their DVD sales were fine, but I mean, it would top out like at low 5 figures for like Kobashi versus Joe. So this was a company that for a long time was this, and this was not Silkin's like primary company. Like he was putting money in because he was a ticket broker, and he was putting money from the ticket broker into this. So that was like the huge like sea change that like I remember like reading at the time that if Silkin did not sell the Sinclair Broadcast Group, ROH would have closed in 2011. Some point. It just was like, I remember him mentioning it was like losing too much money from that. And then Sinclair Broadcast Group. In 2011, we didn't know who Sinclair Broadcast Group was, other than, they have TV networks. But now, I mean, the interesting number that was like listed here was that like Sinclair Broadcast Group had TV affiliates that was 22% in the United States. I believe that's up to 33% now. Then they have all the regional sports networks now. So this was a company that was about to go through a huge period of expansion in the last 4 years. You know, I mean, had some of its biggest expansion ever. And, you know, I mean, this is something that at least the small they had, I remember first getting like the Sinclair Ring of Honor TV. And even at like the time, like it was not necessarily anything to call home about, but it was still like really based around like these big pay-per-view events and then a couple DVD sales. So it's interesting that like this all coincided at the same time as New Japan's first international expansion of the modern era. So I think that's kind of wild. But yeah, this is an insane thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things I can bounce off of there. I mean, first of all, just in the Midwest, which is where I'm located, I have seen the Sinclair expansion take place dramatically over the past few years. You know, when I first started going to Ring of Honor shows in 2013, Sinclair did not have a market in Indianapolis, nor did they in Chicago. Now they have a presence in both markets, and you know, maybe now there's an increase in anti-vaxxers. Who knows? We don't have the research to say one way or another. The first few, and we'll talk about them as we go along, but the first few Sinclair ROH TV episodes are so uncomfortably sterile because they do almost like a systematic restart where it's like, here's who these guys are, and it's one thing to introduce characters and it's one thing to almost remold them into this new vision for a new audience, and it's just very, very uncomfortable. And that is something that, you know, I mean, there have been periods in the Sinclair era that I have loved Ring of Honor. I think 2014 and most of 2015 are really, really good years for the company, but their TV is something they've still never totally been able to figure out, with the exception where they were on Destination America for like 4 months. They've never really been able to figure out how to make their TV must-watch, and it's weird because there's so much talent that passed through there, and it has never felt like must-watch wrestling TV.
I just looked this up. As of today, they have 40% of American households with their 193 stations. They They own 4 different digital multicast network, which are if you have cable and you have like the dash button, it's like 40-1. That's what those are. Those aren't much bigger thing in other parts of the world, not as much in the United States. And then they own both the Tennis Channel and Fox Sports networks. So it's an interesting thing. Like they got in at a time where Sinclair was about to explode, and Ring of Honor. And it took a while for Sinclair to invest in Ring of Honor. Like,
yes.
Like I remember, I was on the site when I was like making complaints about like how bad their production was and how they would use light trees rather than a rig and all of those things. I remember like that happening. Like it was like 2017 that they finally made like the big production upgrades. So it's something that gave them a more stable thing. And of course, like the thing for Sinclair, why they wanted this, they could sell the TV ads. Like it was basically like And I think to this day, like, I don't know when ROH airs in my area, but I remember when I used to have a DVR, I would record it and it would be like 2 a.m. So they were just using it as like production filler just to sell ads. So ROH.
I went. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, so this is like ROH, like, and they're gonna dip down a little bit more so, but this is ROH will be a major figure and clearly past Dragon Gate probably by 2013. Dragon Gate USA by 2013 easily. 2012 debatedly.
Yeah, I went to every Ring of Honor show in Chicago Ridge from 2013 to, I guess now that I think about it, the last Ring of Honor show I was at was Global Wars 2016. So I can't believe it's been 4 years. That is the show, by the way. That is the show where I handed Tomohiro Ishii a $20 bill. But I remember I went, because I was 14 when I started going, I went with my mom to all these Ring of Honor shows, and even she noticed by the end of it, like, wow, like their live event experience has improved so much from the first time we went to a show where it's the Frontier Fieldhouse and it's dimly lit and Jay Lethal and Paul London are sitting at just a folding table with no branding on it, and I walk up to them and have a conversation with them, to, you know, not even, you know, I think the Global War show is, you know, a level up, but even from the show before that where there's, you know, they're billing this Ring of Honor live experience, and there's branding everywhere, and there's lights, and there's music, and it felt like you were really a part of something. So it was a very slow rollout. You said Ring of Honor clearly overtakes Dragon Gate USA by at least 2012. For as much as I love Dragon Gate USA, I don't think they ever had a show quite like Best in the World 2011, just in terms of how big and important it felt. And this is June 6, 2011, so a little bit after our triple shot, but for all intents and purposes, this is either, some people consider it the last show before Sinclair took over, some consider it to be the first show with Sinclair there, but it is a loaded show with a dark match of Generation Me against Future Shock, an opener of Tommaso Ciampa defeating Colt Cabana, Jay Lethal defeating Mike Bennett, Homicide defeating Rhino in a street fight, Michael Elgin defeating Steve Corino, and then after the match, Kevin Steen would make his return to Ring of Honor. TV title match, El Generico wins the belt from Christopher Daniels. There is a 4-way elimination match for the ROH World Tag Team titles with the world's greatest tag team, the All Night Express, the Briscoes, and the Kings of Wrestling. And the main event, a match that I rewatched yesterday and was blown away by just how good it was. Davey Richards winning the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Championship from Eddie Edwards in 36 minutes.
Oh, the famous effing Jen promo. Yeah, no, I think my time was wrong there. I was like thinking maybe 2010 Ring of Honor and Dragon Gate were on the same level because they were arguing over Davey Richards, but yeah, yes. Clearly at this point, yeah, I retract what I said. No, you're absolutely right. Because that show's insane.
You look at the optics of it, and I don't know if they sold out Hammerstein, but they're at least wrestling in front of a large capacity crowd in Hammerstein 2 weeks before. With all due respect to YAMATO and Pac, two wrestlers who I obviously love, they're wrestling in front of 400 people at BB King's in the same city. So, it pains me to say it, but Davey was in the right. He came out ahead in this situation.
Oh, no. It definitely seemed to work out for him at the very least. And I think those are all of our big notes. Like, this is something that, like, there was a lot of big events here. Usually these U.S. Indies things go on a little bit shorter, but, I mean, New Japan in America, Ring of Honor in Sinclair, Tozawa's last weekend in PWG, and then we also have to talk a little bit about Style Battle. This was like this is really, like, as I feel like we're entering, like, the modern era of modern indie wrestling in a lot of ways.
And I completely agree. I'll make one more quick note to back up that point, which is that the night after Best in the World, June 27th, 2011, on Raw, CM Punk cuts the pipe bomb promo on John Cena, where he says, maybe I'll go wrestle in New Japan Pro Wrestling, maybe I'll go back to Ring of Honor. He looks in the camera and says, hey, Colt Cabana, how you doing? The merits of whether or not this angle between CM Punk and John Cena drew are still up for debate, and on the Voices of Wrestling flagship Patreon, Rich Craich just did a very good breakdown of SummerSlam 2011 and all of the failures that went into this program. But ultimately, I say this as someone who wasn't watching wrestling in 2011, but came back to wrestling in 2012 because of CM Punk, and quickly, it was like, oh my God, that's right, this guy's amazing. This is why I liked wrestling. And this pipe bomb promo represented every edgy 14, 15-year-old thought I had, and it was on flagship WWE television. And I think it's safe to say for the next 4 or 5 years, this completely changes the landscape of wrestling in terms of what is possible, visibility of other promotions, and what you can do with your platform as a wrestler in terms of creative freedoms and where you work and how you work. The Punk promo, I think it's worth mentioning here because for my generation, it is a historic wrestling event.
Yeah. And this is all happening around this weekend with DGUSA, where DGUSA had 2 abysmal shows and then was not able to run their historic place and had their lowest box office anniversary show. So really puts a lot of things in context.
Which now we're ready to talk about. Unless you've got something, I'm ready to enter the dragon, my friend.
No, I am more than willing to enter the dragon. So one last note from the Observer. So there was a note here about the shows, and we will talk more about this a little later. It was Austin Aries' last weekend with the group as he decided to take time away from wrestling. He was originally going to quit prior to this weekend, which is what they did the Stips. He was going to leave and lost. He lost and did a swerve. What happens if he changed his mind after the stipulations were announced? Then a few weeks ago, he once again said he wanted to quit wrestling. Also worth noting, the iPay-per-view went out in BB King's this night, and after the show, they announced a new program that they were doing for iPay-per-views, which, that is very much like this. The old policy was if you ordered the pay-per-view on the internet, you could watch it until the DVD comes out. Now you can order an iPay-per-view and watch it forever. So yeah, video on demand was not a thing with early WWN Live and DGUSA.TV. So those are 2 big notes there. The attendance here was announced that, or Dave Meltzer said, about 500, and as I said, the iPay-per-view in the building didn't crash, which is something because it did not happen anymore. They're going to offer the December iPay-per-view free to everyone who bought that one. So as we get into this, we are back in BB King's Blues Club Bar and Grill. It is June 5th, 2011, and we open up the show with Blood Warriors coming out. And it's the first time that I noticed that Shima was really getting booed by the crowd, and he says he hates New York. And that leads to Speed Star hitting, and then we opened up with Ricochet versus Masato Yoshino. Masato Yoshino won this match in a listed 16 minutes and 54 seconds with the Sol Naciente.
We talked a few weeks ago about the Ricochet versus Susumu Yokosuka match, which was a fine match. Those two would go on to have better performances with one another, but it was, Ricochet's singles match, and that was important for him to be able to accomplish such a thing at that point in his career. What blew me away here was the fact that it's Ricochet versus Yoshino. You would expect a certain type of match from these guys, but what we got instead was, despite Ricochet being the heel, Ricochet sells for a long portion of this match, and Ricochet survives off of his selling and his charisma, which if you look at a year ago, he's the guy that has the double moonsault, and that is it, and that is all that Ricochet is known for. A year into the future, 6 months with Dragon Gate, Ricochet looked like a completely different and close to becoming a well-rounded professional wrestler.
Yeah, the thing that took me back about this match was Ricochet was throwing some great forearms, and as a guy who's not really known as a striker, I was like, okay, Ricochet, you're actually laying it in here, and it's takes me a while to think about the next match where I thought about, Ricochet's throwing some great strikes. And other notes that I really like, I like this match so much more than the Susumu Yokosuka match. I remember being a little bit down and a little bit disappointed about that match a little bit. This match, I felt was exactly what you were expecting. I feel like this is Ricochet's best singles match in DGUSA to date. And then I thought it was kind of great that Masato Yoshino goes for the From Jungle, and that's a move he doesn't even do anymore. But the crowd was buying into that as a finish. And if you're buying into the From Jungle as a finish, then you're doing a really good job of getting the crowd in. And then, of course, 3 minutes in, Shima tried to throw a chair into the ring. So, I mean, just... On every level, I feel like this worked from a preposterous Shima level.
It's a good night for Shima. There's a lot of Shima stuff that I really, really like on this show.
Okay, so I went 4 flat on this. This is a notebook match in my books. I thought this was excellent.
So I went 3.5, but I completely validate your 4-star feeling on this match. What I really liked about this, now, look, I will say this about every single match on the show, could have been a few minutes shorter.
Yes.
But what is cool about this is that it is the closest we really have to the idea of Masato Yoshino working an American TV match. Again, it's a little too long to say, like, oh, this is what Yoshino would be like if he worked for X promotion that had TV. Because even, like, the Speed Muscle versus Motor City Machine Guns match, that is what TV wrestling should be, but it's not what TV wrestling is. This match with the story, with Shima on the outside, with just the pace they worked, it feels like Yoshino's working TV, which is just nice. It's a bit of a novelty in his illustrious career to see a match like this.
Yeah, and like this really was working like the upstart versus the veteran. And how can Ricochet like stick into this match? Like the only thing I can imagine that this match was like 2 minutes shorter, and then we started getting like calls saying like 5 minutes have elapsed. 10 minutes have elapsed, 3 minutes remaining, and then Masato Yoshino goes, screw this, Torbolino, a Sol Naciente, and gets out of there. Like, that's the only thing to me that would, like, raise the stakes in this match. But it was just, like, you know, and that's, as you said, a lot of matches on this show go on for a little bit longer, especially the next match. But do you have any more thoughts about Yoshino and Ricochet before we get on with the rest of the card?
A very, very good opener.
Yeah, this was getting this match first off after having to sludge through Uprising and Fearless. I was much happier. Like I was like dreading watching the show, and then like this happened. I was like, all right, I'm back in this. Mike's back, baby. Mike's back on board. As I said earlier, they did not completely like pull out of the tailspin on this show because of stuff that would happen later, but they definitely smoothed the course, and I was already in a good mood. Post-match, as soon as the bell rang, Blood Warriors jumped in the ring and laid him out. Pac ran in for the save. Of course, they are Mochizuki Army members, and then Pac eventually gets overwhelmed as it was 4-on-2. Then Yamato came in for the save and bails him out. And I really like this because this ended like, okay, these 3 guys are affiliated, but it ended with Pac and Yamato staring each other down. I thought that was a real effective way of building up the main event.
Great angle. No complaints from me. As we go along, and this is about the point of the promotion where it starts happening, where Dragon Gate USA becomes match angle, and it's this awful repetitive nature of these shows, with the big issue being that the angles are never as clear and concise as this one was. This was very well done.
Yeah, I mean, like earlier this weekend, they had the never-ending D.U.F versus Susumu and Mochizuki fight. This was like 2 minutes, and it got everything across. We went backstage for another quick segment as Ronin was on a serious note trying to figure out what they're going to do about this match, because this match was signed even though Chuck Taylor wasn't involved in it, so they needed to find another partner in this 6-man tag team elimination match. Johnny wanted Goldberg, but Rich Swann said, no, I have someone, and he ran away. I actually got a chuckle out of the Goldberg line when he said that, and it was another like short, effective segment.
Yeah, no, so far, very much enjoying Enter the Dragon.
And then Speed, Muscle, and Spike Mohican was a top year 2 moment. And, you know, it was a top year 2 moment. You know, you can't have Shingo and Danielson on this thing. But, yeah, this was a top year 2 moment.
I think it's one of Gabe's best booking decisions ever. I think it is as effective and I said this on the show, this is Untouchable 2010 with Danielson versus Yamato, and this match of Shima and Ricochet versus Yoshino and Doi, they make Ricochet in one night. This is just a marvelous job of making a star, and not only one night, but in one match. It's incredible.
A match that did not make a star was AR Fox defeating Pinkie Sanchez in 13 minutes and 2 seconds. Again, they went kind of long on the show with the low main pain, and is there something that like he was inducted into D.U.F. and I missed this? Because like after the match they have the idea that D.U.F. comes out and lays out AR Fox, and they make a big thing about that AR Fox beat up a member of D.U.F., so that's why Kennan and Callahan were coming out for this. But was there something I missed that like between the shows that Pinkie Sanchez was officially became a D.U.F. member?
It's a huge issue with the presentation of D.U.F. They neglected 2 things. They neglected early on to fully explain what DUF stood for. And then after that, they neglected to properly indoctrinate Pinkie Sanchez into the group. There's too much up in the air about, is he there, is he not, does he respect Callahan, does Callahan respect him? It's very confusing.
Right.
In the way it's laid out. And there's, they cut promos, but the promos are Callahan in canon, so we never really know. And it's just unfortunate because there's a lot of stuff, at least up to this point, before we get to the Midwest Triple Shot, that I really like about the DUF. And I think they just bring an interesting flavor into the promotion. This match, I want you to go first, Mike. What are your thoughts on AR Fox versus Pinkie Sanchez?
This was weird. We had like 3 minutes of Pinkie Sanchez wrestling with his tights down, but with the Speedo on. This was a match that should have been like a 5-minute squash.
Yes. The tight spot, I believe, happened by accident, and then they just went with it, where they were climbing on top of each other, and Fox started to pull down his tights, and they went with it, and it seemingly improvised something out of it, which it was not offensive, but also wasn't very good, which I think is the Pinkie Sanchez story right there. It's a match where Pinkie was fine. Now, he does not ever need to be wrestling in 13-minute matches.
No.
What stood out to me here is that AR Fox, who we saw him in Philly, where he and Sami Callahan killed themselves in a freestyle match, and then AR Fox wrestles Cheech the next night. He's in the Breakout Challenge stuff and then 6-way matches in Atlanta. He's obviously in the Style Battle Tournament. He's wrestling in CZW in the Junior Heavyweight title program with Adam Cole at this point. What's noticeable here is that in this match, and especially the night before, but it's more obvious here, partially just because AR Fox has different gear that looks so much more professional than what he had been wearing. AR Fox has made a leap. He has made a step up in his game, and he is now, he went from being that guy that does those moves to now I have a better understanding of who AR Fox is, what he can bring to the table, and his ceiling on singles matches, which was brought to us the night before with his match with Akira Tozawa, and now he's in a position against Pinkie Sanchez where he is the more talented of the two in the match, and the match doesn't fall apart. It's a 3-star match. It's nothing special. But the fact that AR Fox can now lead somebody to a 3-star match is very impressive given his experience level, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you actually pretty much covered this match as much as we really need to. So I went 2 3/4. Post-match, D.U.F. came out to chew out AR Fox. Apparently, like, his big nickname was #1 draft pick. For what? I don't know.
He was the #1 draft pick for Dragon Gate USA, which goes back to the show in Philly where Lenny says he would be the #1 draft pick in Dragon Gate USA. Now, what that means, I do not know, but that is something that he was branded as in the past for some reason. I guess to say he's like a blue chip prospect, okay, but they never really did anything with that.
All right, yeah, so Sami Callahan talked about his abs, and then that's why I noted, I guess Pinkie is now in DUF, and then they started the feud that I think is probably one of the worst long-term feuds in the company, AR Fox versus DUF. They lay him out, they throw a keg on him and attack him with a rope pylon, and actually this was an effective way of starting the feud. We'll see how we feel about this about 8 episodes' time.
We'll see how we feel about it in about 8 episodes' time. For now, super effective angle. I loved it. It is exactly what DUF needed, where if you're not going to put them against Blood Warriors or specific guys long-term in Junction 3, this is the direction they needed to go. And again, we'll see how we feel about it, but the angle starts off really hot, and Callahan and Cannon come out looking really good from it.
And then we had another year 2 highlight. This was the Kamikaze USA versus World 1 tag, which was the first time I think like in a long time that all the big 6 were in a tag team match together in Milwaukee, which was, again, another tremendous match. Gabe's picking good matches for this. And that leads us to the 9-way Fray match case.
Look, there's a lot of guys in this match. It starts off, and I'll let you take the brunt of this, but I just need to mention the match starts off with Cedric Alexander in his Dragon Gate USA debut, and then Larry Dallas comes out from behind the curtain with a 2, with a microphone, and Larry Dallas says, "I know I'm not supposed to be here," and Rob Naylor on commentary replies, "Oh God, no." And for that, we love Rob Naylor.
Yeah, and then he promised that if Atu loses, he would leave forever. The first, which, okay.
What a lie. What a just not true. That did not happen.
So John Davis won this match. It was Cedric Alexander versus Atu versus Caleb Conley versus John Davis versus Facade versus Flip Kendrick versus Lewis Linden versus Sugar Duncanton versus Tony Nese. I didn't write down all the eliminations, but the deciding elimination was John Davis on Tony Nese for the 3 seconds around the world. Here's what I'll say about this. This went incredibly long. This went 19 minutes, and the time that was John Davis wrecking shop ruled. I'm now on the John Davis train. I've reassessed this and decided, all right, I'm aboard John Davis. Was not a fan of John Davis at the time. Now, at least watching this through here, he just completely just like steamrolls people and throws them around. And then you had like this weird like shindy section in the middle of it, and then you had more John Davis just destroying people, and it owned.
Yeah, there is a portion of the match that is dominated by Facade, Flip Kendrick, and Lewis Linden, which is dangerous. Do not do that. If you are booking an independent professional wrestling promotion, do not have those three out there dictating how your match is going to be. But you're exactly right. This is the John Davis show. Atu kills Cedric Alexander. Alexander is gone in a minute and 15 seconds. And then out comes John Davis. And this is a 20-minute match. And in the second minute of the match, John Davis hits a pounce on Atu.
What a pounce.
That destroys him. And my issue with this match, look, I think they actually nailed the layout of it, where in the end, John Davis hits the 3 seconds around the world on Tony Nese, who had been built up this entire weekend as this can't-miss guy. John Davis kills him in the end and wins the match. But I really think they made a mistake not ending the match with Davis pouncing Atu into oblivion, because 18 minutes later, that's all I could think about was how great that spot was and how tough John Davis looked. But instead we had to deal with 17 minutes of Facade and Flip Kendrick and guys I don't necessarily care for. But John Davis is the guy they wanted to get over, and John Davis came out looking really good from this match.
Yeah. And then post-match, we went backstage again. Rich Swann's plan worked, and then we had the formation of Ronin as a year 2 highlight, which, for me, this is the first thing. It's like, oh yeah, Ronin originally were like supposed to be mega heels. Like,
yeah,
like that was like my one takeaway from like these year 2 things. A lot of them, you know, hit the notes that you think they would hit, and this one was like, oh wait, that happened. And that led us to D.U.F. of Sami Callihan and Eric Cannon defeating the Open the Dreamgate champions, Masaaki Mochizuki and Susumu Yokosuka, in 16 minutes and 49 seconds, when Callihan got Yokosuka to submit to the stretch muffler. And I have to say this, any match that Rob Naylor comes out and immediately says, we have M2K reuniting, I'm already going to be in a good mood. And this ended up being like, this was like the one match that like at 16 minutes and 49 seconds, like, you know what? That worked for the time. They worked this like as like these old vets basically beating the crap out of these rookies, and this felt like a bigger win than it came off as. And that was like the thing that surprised me, is the crowd did not recognize how big of a win this was for D.U.F.
If you had to rank the 3 D.U.F. versus Mochizuki matches throughout the weekend of Callihan versus Mochizuki, Cannon versus Mochizuki, and then this tag match, how do you stack those 3 up against each other?
All right, so I'm paging back my notebook. I went 3.5 on this one. I went 3 3/4 for Callihan Mochizuki and 3.5 for Cannon. So this one would probably be my second favorite. I thought that.
Okay, so we're exactly in line there, because that was my takeaway from it was, man, it wasn't quite as good as that Mochizuki versus Callihan match that 2 weeks later I'm still thinking like, man, that was a really good match. Like, Callihan does not have matches like that anymore. I wish we still had that Sami Callihan of like mall goth jock that just took it to Mochizuki. Here, I mean, these guys, the D.U.F. team gets obliterated. Specifically Yokosuka, who, you know, obviously had to do the J.O.B. was taking his aggression out on Eric Cannon in particular. There's a few clotheslines, Jumbo no Kachis, that Eric Cannon gets hit with. And Cannon is a big dude. He is built. It doesn't seem like a ton would phase him. And he looks like he is in so much pain when Susumu throws that baseball bat of a bicep across his chest. Really, really enjoyed those interactions.
Cannon sold his ass off in this match. Like, Cannon, like, is... I know how you're thinking, oh, Sami Callihan was like this to date, I'd be okay with him. I'm more thinking about, why didn't Eric Cannon become a bigger star? Because he just, like, sold his ass off and made, like, everything look great in this match. And everything really gelled. This was, like... Again, this was a match that really worked, and the only like disappointing thing was like you had the finish, which was like that diving forearm going into like the stretch muffler that was so brutal. And at that point, you're like, okay, it looks like he has him, and it's like, oh, he actually got him with this. Like Susumu tapped out, and then this should have been like a moment that DUF was made. Like they've already focused their attention on AR Fox, but now they've won their first feud. They defeated the former M2K members. They pinned a former Dreamgate champion who was teaming with the current Dreamgate champion. And the crowd was like not like reacting as highly as you'd think for that. But then again, I feel like one of the weird things about Masaaki Mochizuki and DGUSA, no one like they don't put enough respect on his name. The fans never
You know what it is? It's the same way Mochizuki comes across in Dragon Gate USA the same way Tanahashi comes off when he works Ring of Honor New Japan joint shows, where they know Tanahashi's a star, but he doesn't connect with the American audience the way that the American audience adopted Okada, or in this sense, Shima or Dragon Kid or Yoshino or Doi or Yamato.
Or Tozawa.
Or Tozawa was the better example. Tozawa, thank you. Tozawa was the one that I should have mentioned. Yeah, they just never gravitated towards Mochizuki, which, look, I obviously don't understand how that's possible, but it's that Tanahashi thing where, especially those early Ring of Honor New Japan joint shows, he was positioned in main events or semi-main events, and the crowd was never totally into his matches the way that they would be for Okada or Nakamura or Naito, and Mochizuki has that same symptom.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into this on the Mania Weekend shows about how I was one of only 4 people who was chanting Mochi. Like, we'll get into that. But it definitely is a thing.
I do think, just from what I like in wrestling and in production, they give up on the idea of embracing Dragon Gate lineage really quick in this promotion. And obviously, there's some issue with gaining the rights to the Japanese footage because they stopped doing the bonus disc.
Right.
And, they stopped using any footage they had tied to Japan. But it seems like Susumu Yokosuka is someone who is positioned as a mid-level Dragon Gate guy in this promotion. And in Japan at the time, he was positioned as a mid-level guy. But as you mentioned, he's a former Open the Dream Gate champion. He's been in the company since day one. He's a guy that is so respected by the fan base and by his peers. And they just never really get that idea over. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where I just really wish they were running, these 60-second promo packages of, here's Susumu Yokosuka, former Dreamgate champion, Summer Adventure Tag League winner, Twin Gate champion, this and that, this and that. But if you're watching this show for the first time, on iPay-per-view, you don't know who this guy is. And you don't know who Mochizuki is. And they fail after really the first 4 or 5, maybe 6 shows, because that takes us to the end of Phoenix. They just never get back on board with explaining and expanding on who the Dragon Gate guys are outside of a newswire blurb about this guy winning this or this guy winning that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's something that I feel like progressively will become more and more of a problem with the promotion. And it's something that, like, with this match, and with, like, how you said about, like, the newswire and things like this, throughout the rest of the promotion, as I just said, it'll go like this, like, to the point of when we get, like, deeper in and when you don't really have, like, units being as much of a thing, and especially post Blood Warriors and Junction 3, I don't feel like the company made any effort whatsoever to keep people up on stuff. So this is, like, the start of that, and it's something that's, like, so frustrating, especially, like, now we live in this world where WWE owns all this footage, and it's...
Which should terrify people. I've said that before,
Yes.
I'll say it again. WWE owning the Dragon USA Library is not good. That should scare people.
Yeah, and as an archivist, I don't think we will be seeing any of this footage in full, and I don't think we will be seeing matches like the next match really in full ever, and I don't think that a lot of this stuff now is going to be crypted, and that sucks.
No, we'll never see these shows in full again. I mean, it's the reality of it. They're not going to open the historic gate with BB Hulk versus Yamato to the WWE Network. They're not doing that. It's not going to happen. And it's, it's one thing. It's bad. It's bad. I don't like that they own as much footage as they do, and I especially don't like that they own this footage in particular, because you're never going to see this stuff in full if you don't already own it.
Yeah, basically. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I feel like that we do this series. And even though we're reaching the point of the promotion is not what it was, and it's going to be frustrating for us for a while, but if we don't talk about it, no one else will, and there won't be some sort of free record of the promotion after this. Like, that's the thing that really frustrates me, is that this is a 5-year promotion. It's a promotion that has approximately about 50 shows. We're about at the halfway point, if not over the halfway point of the promotion. Like, the promotion will be dead by WrestleMania week in 2014. But you're never going to see Mercury Rising 2014 on the network.
And you know what? That one, fair. Maybe they shouldn't upload that.
Fair play to that. And CZW DGUSA Heat from Hollywood, Florida, definitely will never be on that network. But yeah, no. So like the fact that they did not like prepare people for Masaaki Mochizuki and Susumu Yokosuka is like indicative of how the promotion feels like it's going to be over the next 2.5 years of existence. And that leads us right to a WWN live promo. And that goes into another year-to-year moment. This was during the tag team tournament. This was the Die Fly team of Naruki Doi and Ricochet versus Yoshino and Pac from Philadelphia. Another, like, Gabe picked, like, the right moments for this, the ones he could do. And that leads us to a recap of Austin Aries' turn, which, yes, that's an important thing to do. But if you're going to have a recap of Austin Aries' turn, why don't you have a 30-second interstitial about Susumu Yokosuka? Why didn't you have one for Masaaki Mochizuki? And that was like my big takeaway from that, from like this little interregnum before we get into the elimination tag.
I would argue if you're going to recap the Austin Aries turn, recap it instead of just replaying the segment, because
Right.
I feel like we just got the full turn once again. If we just had to watch that angle that was long at the time, we had to just rewatch all of it in preparation for this match.
For this match that is Masato Yoshino joining up with Ronin versus Blood Warriors in a 6-man tag team elimination match. It went 35 minutes and 10 seconds. Going down the eliminations, the first eliminations was Shima eliminating Yoshino with the Blood Silk Road clutch. Something that I can't remember the last time other than this that I actually had to go back and like check to make sure this is the Blood Silk Road clutch. I had to go look for that case. So that's something also about this match. Shima was in a mood tonight, breaking out. That wasn't the Jorge clutch or Jorge special. It was or Jorge complete. It was the Blood Silk Road that he eliminated Masato Yoshino with. Then Swan defeated Brody Lee with a roll up. We'll get into what happened to that as we get into the match. And then Shima defeated Swan with Meteora, and then Gargano eliminated both Shima and Austin Aries with the Gargano escape to be the sole survivor of this match. And this was a lot. This match was a lot. It's currently the longest match I think that DGUSA had in its history up to this point. And we kind of need to take this like by chunks, I feel like. So what was your thoughts of like the first few moments before Masato Yoshino came out? And then we had like the full 6-man tag, like leading up until the elimination of Yoshino. Like, what were your thoughts of this match?
Well, Blood Warriors enter first, and then Gargano and Swan come out, and Brody Lee and Austin Aries start brawling with them, and the camera is right up on Gargano and Swan, and judging from their reactions of shock, and then like, oh wait, I have to sell this, I don't think the pre-match attack was planned for them. I think that is a decision that Aries made, and what struck me here was that they did the Cork and Hall walk and brawl style in BB King's. They just didn't have to go up 2 flights of stairs
Right.
and threaten to pull someone else, or to throw somebody over the balcony. but they did the Cork and Hall style of match. And when you're in there with CIMA and Brody Lee and Yoshino, look, it's not the most exciting thing in the world. I think something that we've talked about on the weekly update shows that we do is kind of the luxury of not being allowed to do that right now, I think is making a lot of matches more digestible than they might have been in a, air quotes, normal universe. Here they brawl all around the arena, and I like it. I'm on board with this match at this point, because a lot of it is Blood Warriors beating down Rich Swann, and Swann sells his ass off, and I've got more to say on Swann as we go along in this match, but I like this opening portion.
Yeah, like, it's an absolute dismantling. There is a kind of ridiculous slow sell, like, so it was CIMA who had Rich Swann, and he wishboned him and started kicking him in the groin while the referee was distracted. And then Austin Aries pulled his arms, and then Brody Lee jumped and did a splash onto like the knees and the waist of Rich Swann. Then Rich Swann sold it like he was having a seizure, which was like, okay, that's one way of taking this slip, but they haven't been down Rich Swann for a long time. But yeah, Swann sold his ass off basically up until he was eliminated.
Yeah, Swann, well, I'll say it now. I mean, by the end of the match, 36 minutes deep, Gargano gets his moment. He comes across at the end of this match, and then especially by the end of the show, comes across like a star. But while Rich Swann is in the match, Rich Swann is the one who had my complete undivided attention, because I once again, I thought he was brilliant here, and the booking does not reflect the respect of Rich Swann that I have for him, especially at this time. But this is the Swann show. I mean, he is excellent in this match, and he and CIMA have such good chemistry with one another, and Gargano and CIMA work well together too. But watching Swann and CIMA go at it when CIMA dominates him is just really exciting for me. I think those two always had good chemistry with one another.
And I think some of it might be rooted that I get the distinct impression that CIMA does not have a very high opinion of Rich Swann at this time. Like, this...
that is fair.
Like, a lot of it is Swann selling because CIMA is laying him out. And then we had this moment where Swann was in the turnbuckle, was against the turnbuckle, and Brody Lee runs and gives him a big boot, and his knee gives out. It is noted after the show that he tears both his ACL and MCL, so they had to pull an audible, and Rich Swann gets a quick roll up on Brody Lee. I definitely was not playing, and this was 20 minutes into the match, but Brody Lee's knee gives out, and it's one of those things I knew his knee gave out, but I forgot that it went out on the big boot, and it looked gross when it happened.
Yeah, I noticed early on in this match that the ring mics were really hot, because I was hearing way more of the referee than I typically do. I don't know why that was, because I didn't notice it for the prior matches, but for this one, I kept on hearing a voice. I was like, who the hell is that? But it was the referee, break it up, or whatever he was saying, and then Brody hits the big boot and goes down, and you can very clearly hear him saying on the DVD mix, you need to pin me, please pin me. And Gargano goes to do it, and then Austin Aries throws Gargano to the outside.
Yeah.
Which I know wasn't intentional, it was just very bad timing. And then Aries and Gargano are brawling on the floor, and that's where the camera is. And while that is happening, maybe I just blinked and missed it, but I don't believe they showed Rich Swann pinning Brody Lee, but I take it he just rolled him up, and then Brody Lee slowly rolled out of the ring and got help to the back.
Yeah, I mean, you audibly hear him calling the audible. Austin Aries being Austin Aries, and then they had the audible, and Swann got the pinfall there. And at that point, everyone, at least the Americans, all looked pretty shook. Other than like the Ronin side looked like, oh god, like what? Like you could see like the moment look cross their face, and then CIMA kind of took it into himself to have like a 3-minute beatdown on Rich Swann before giving one of the more brutal meteors to eliminate him.
Yeah, and this is definitely a definitive point of the match, because it's CIMA and Swann and Brody for so much of this match, and I just love those three together in that hodgepodge sense, and then Brody goes out, and then, like you said, Swan gets just destroyed with a Meteora, and you're left with Gargano versus CIMA, who he is, positioned as his biggest rivalry to date, and Gargano versus Austin Aries, someone who has plagued him since he came into the company.
At this note, I wrote down that Mike Keener was kind of a shitty ref in this match. Like, the refereeing was bad throughout this. Like, I thought that it was pretty obvious there. And then CIMA, after Rich Swann was eliminated, started doing like, "Oh, Ronin baby, I'm baby," and then he mocks Ronin. But then like through all this, then Johnny Gargano locks on the Gargano escape at 28 minutes, so that leaves just Austin Aries and Gargano for the remainder of it. And then there was like this really kind of like Gargano has a slingshot spear, and then Austin Aries does like a lame face buster out of it. Like, did you catch that?
Yeah.
Like, that was really bad.
Yeah, I did.
It was really bad. And then it kind of went back together, and then it eventually it was like there was a lot of play about the Hertz donut and then like the brain buster. They did have Gargano did get a kick out of a 450, so kicked out of the finish, and then finally got the Gargano escape to win this match, and to at least at this point seemed like that Ronin won the feud.
Yeah, so Gargano submits CIMA, which is now the second time that has happened in this building. He did it at United NYC
Right.
in the tag tournament, and then does it again here. And look, we have not been kind to Austin Aries. This is his final DGUSA appearance. His DGUSA appearances, for the most part, were really bad. The period with Gargano and Aries is the weak point in the match. Now, I don't entirely attribute that to Aries. I just think at that point the match is going too long. There's a 7-minute gap between CIMA being eliminated and the eventual final submission. That could have been cut in half, and I think it would have been just much more effective. But ultimately, Gargano submits CIMA and submits Aries, and that feels like a moment. Because going into this match, Gargano submitted CIMA in this building in a tag. He lost to CIMA in a singles match. He lost to Blood Warriors and the Mercury Rising 6-man. He lost to Aries 2 nights before. He was just flailing in no man's land. And then the night, the show we talked about last week where he almost submits YAMATO and then CIMA ruins it. And then he cuts that backstage promo with Swan where it's like, man, I really think I can be Dreamgate champion. I think I can beat YAMATO. And it was a good angle the night before. It's like, wow, I believe him, but it wasn't necessarily warranted. But then he comes in here, and like I said, he submits his two biggest rivals, and it feels like a moment. It feels like Johnny Gargano is becoming someone, and it's great to see. It's a long match. It is not a great match. I think it is very good, because ultimately, it is an intricate 6-man tag that I am going to give the 25-year career of this guy. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he always constructs these matches and is involved in matches like this that are great. I think CIMA laid out this match, and minus the hiccup of Brody Lee destroying his knee, whenever CIMA's in the ring, this match is on fire and firing on all cylinders. It's a 3 3/4 match because I don't love the finish and how long it took to get there, but I like the construction of this match overall. I hope that makes sense.
No, I'm not going to repeat what you said, but those were exactly my thoughts on 3 3/4 as well. It just was something that, like, the climax of this match was 7 minutes before. And that makes you have to look at, okay, who are the two people in the ring for that last 7 minutes? It was Gargano and Aries. Who is the veteran? Who is the person who's been leading this entire feud? Who's been the person that has been having his matches regardless if it fits in on the card or not? Austin Aries. So I think that's an incredibly valid point. And this kind of goes right into the main event and in the post-match. This was the time that really it felt like, okay, now we have who's going to be like that Gargano is here. He is like the homegrown star. You got the feeling of at the end of the show. And it's just a shame that you had to go through like 7 minutes of like back and forth for it to happen. And then you have to wait until after the main event. But this is as much of any night, and we'll go through the shows. This is when Johnny Gargano is now on the Dragon System guys level. It might not necessarily always feel like this, but at least at this moment, everyone can be like, okay, Johnny Gargano is a guy. He submitted Shima now twice in this building. He took out the guy who just completely has embarrassed himself in the ring and has embarrassed the company when he's been around. And that is a solid enough takeaway that I will give that 3 3/4 is appropriate there. And it does make you think like, okay, what could have happened if Brody Lee was in there for much longer? Who was going to like end up being here? Like, what was the original Ronin versus Blood Warriors match with a healthy Chuck Taylor and Brody Lee without his knee going out?
It's ultimately a definitive victory for Johnny Gargano. We just talked about Ricochet and how he was made in one night because he pinned Naruki Doi with a double moonsault. This is not quite as effective because, you know, you can play we're telling a story, that's why Aries beat Gargano. I understand that. I just think Aries was such an overbearing and unpleasant fixture in the company at this time that it was the wrong kind of heat to see Aries beat Gargano 2 nights before. But for Gargano to have this moment, it's like, okay, he's a guy now. I respect him. I get what he's done. He has that definitive victory that his character desperately needed at this point in his career.
Yeah. And it's a moment that if anything's going to happen on the show that they're going to put on the network for Best Johnny Gargano, it might be like the last 10 minutes of this match, to be honest. So then we had a DGUSA TV promo, and then we had the last top moment of year 2 in Dragon Gate USA. And Case, it's a moment that I didn't realize that was really such a moment until they presented it as this. It was Yamato defending the Freedom Gate Championship twice in 16 hours in Atlanta. Did you think of that as like a tremendous thing that within 16 hours he defended the title twice? Because I didn't think of that until they presented it to me.
No, it was not something that I had realized, and it was the one moment where I was like, oh yeah, no, I guess you're right. It maybe not what I would have picked,
right.
But you're factually that's correct.
Yeah, we can't say you're wrong here, Gabe, but did not think of that beforehand, and that led us into the title match, the Freedom Gate title match that they've built up all weekend long. Yamato defending against Pac. He defeats Pac in 22 minutes and 27 seconds with the Galleria, and in a match that I really was having a good time with. Like this was the match that afterwards I was like, you know what? This is why I think they pulled out of the tailspin they've leveled out after this match. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that this is the last singles match Pac and Yamato had with one another. They did not wrestle each other in a singles match after this for the remainder of Pac's first stint in the company, and then they did not wrestle each other in a singles match when Pac returned in 2018. So this is the last version of this match we have, and it's just, I've said it before, and now it happens in a singles match, so it's a little bit more warranted, I feel like, but just the individual performance from Pac, where he's bumping like crazy at times, and then he does that like a pole vaulter's jump, a Fosbury flop is what I'm thinking of, like over the top rope onto Yamato, and it's just everything he does with intensity and with purpose. And what this match felt like, which is maybe not what you want to have for one of your flagship shows, your anniversary show. Maybe you want something a little bit more dramatic. Maybe you want something that feels a little bit bigger. But this reminded me of like Roderick Strong competing for the ROH World title, where you know he's not going to win because he's probably wrestling in Dayton, and they never changed the title in Dayton because it's the first show on the double shot. And granted, here it's the finale, so I think Pac has a bigger edge with that idea of like, oh, could he win? Like, is this possible? And I was buying into that idea that like, wow, Pac is really coming across like he could win the Dream Gate or the Freedom Gate belt. Obviously, there would be no logical reason for that to happen. Had Pac won, it would have been a ginormous shock. But during the match, I was believing the story that Pac could have won, which is the best thing I can say about this match that I went 4 flat on. Just for the sheer effort of the two, I think it's a 4-star match.
I went 4 1/4, so this is like the show that like I realize you've normally been a little bit higher about stuff than I am, but this is the show that I think I'm higher than you about, at least the matches that I go high on. And the thing that got me about this is Pac, this is like kind of a match where it is totally about Pac. You're absolutely right about this. But this is a match that I wish happened in 2015 or 2016 during Yamato's Dreamgate reign, because to me the story of this match was Yamato finally surviving Pac, like going through all of this, and then being able to like finally like find his spot and go like, all right, I'm done here, locking in the Dojime sleeper, and then from that point it was him just taking care of business. And I thought that was incredible. I thought that was an incredibly smart match, especially for someone like Pac, who is in Japan, like he is treated at like his level, but he's still, I believe at this time, he still is the Brave Gate champion, but he was not having like top of the card matches at that point. And this was like a big moment. I feel like if you look in the overall Dragon System canon, like this is like the first like thing, like singles performance of Pac, where it's like, no, I am one of the top guys. You should treat me as a top guy from now on. And I feel like that was this moment here.
And then after that, I think we have another top guy initiation. Mike, explain this post-match angle.
So like I do have one question.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry to jump ahead.
Oh, no problem. So we came across this with Tozawa in Atlanta. Knowing that Pac is going to be around on DGUSA shows throughout the end of this, could this been a moment where Pac became Freedom Gate champion and have been made total sense? Because I wonder about this, especially with Yamato's reign at this time.
It does seem like a little bit of a waste to promote this Champions Challenge that Gabe had promoted, where Yamato would challenge for the United Gate belt and then Pac would challenge for the Freedom Gate belt. It does seem like a little bit of a waste for one of the titles to not change hands. And, probably 5 shows from now, I think it is, we'll be talking about Pac versus Brody Lee. And if I was, given the pencil, that would be for the world title of any promotion in the world, for that matter. But I think Yamato is the right move here. Now, again, I still think they could have put the belt on Tozawa in Atlanta. And I'm not going to say that was the right move to put the belt on Tozawa, but man, I really am leaning with revisionist history going, man, I think they should have pulled the trigger there. I think that would have been good for not only Tozawa, obviously, but I think it would have been good for Dragon Gate USA. Yamato surviving that Tozawa match, I think he had to win this, and I'm okay with the result. For as much as I love him, for as much as his work has blown me away during this project, I think it is realistic and reasonable to say that 2011 Pac headlining any promotion is maybe not the smartest business move. 2018, 2019, 2020, if he can ever wrestle again, Pac has only wrestled 7 matches this calendar year, which sickens me. It's not his fault. It just, God, what a bummer. But assuming Pac can ever come back to AEW again, I would legitimately consider putting the world title on him. I think he's that good. In 2011, I get why you wouldn't really want that as the image of your promotion.
That's fair. It's just something that popped in my mind that I wanted to ask you on this. So, this coronation thing. So, Yamato and Pac have like a show of respect. Of course, they're both members of the Mochizuki Army, and we talked a lot about Mochizuki Army last week. They would both be members of Junction 3, and they were going to kind of show respect. And Shima came out, and he challenges Yamato, and that means that Blood Warriors attack. So they laid out this, and Shima said that he wanted the belt, and that sets up the next Freedom Gate challenge. And then Gargano and Swan come out for a save, and then Johnny Gargano does the go home talk for the first time in the Gabe-verse history, unless he did it on a Evolve show, which I don't think they were doing go homes on the Evolve shows. But he says he talked about his and the company's ascent. I mean, that's one way of looking at it, Johnny. I mean, it's your ascent, definitely. DGUSA's, well, they ran their second anniversary show in front of 500 people versus the 900 they had the year previous. And then he says that Ronin is the best stable as they've won. And they made a reference to the Freedom Gate because he did hold up the Freedom Gate belt and handed it back to Yamato during the beatdown. And definitely, like, he's talked about it, as you mentioned, about like the night before, saying like, I think I could be Freedom Gate champion. And then thinks everyone goes home. But at this point, we have 2 ways that Yamato is going in his future. Shima has already immediately laid out a challenge. And then Johnny Gargano has made a claim saying, I will be a future Freedom Gate champion, and I am going to take this title. So I thought that was pretty remarkable as well. And it was a real effective use of the go home promo, which is usually one of like the moments where I look at and see how much time's left on the disc before I decide to eject it.
It is an awesome, awesome angle. where everyone, Shima, Yamato, and Gargano, all come out looking better because of it. Because Yamato shows some charisma as he clutches his Freedom Gate title and pets it when Gargano says he wants the belt. Shima obviously cutting a heel English promo was super entertaining. But the end of it, where Gargano, without the Freedom Gate title at this point, but still, him closing the show over Pac, it's like, okay, this seems like it's his promotion now, or at least it's becoming his promotion. It's a really big elevation night for Johnny Gargano, because he comes into this, like we've said, Ronin is not booked strong. I mean, Ronin is honestly, they're booked weak. I mean, they do not come across well. They do not come across dangerous or destructive or effective. They come across like three dorks, quite honestly. And that's not just because of the promos they cut and the way they're presented. It's because of the fact that they don't win matches against, Blood Warriors and whoever else, whatever other Japanese talent is there. But this night with Gargano submitting Shima, submitting Aries, and then cutting the go-home promo, there is a stark contrast in Gargano's momentum exiting this show compared to when he entered this show. And for that, Dragon Gate USA needs to be applauded.
Yeah, and I remember how critical I was for a while about how they were treating Ronin, and to the point where I was like, hey, is this a cardinal sin that they weren't treating Ronin to the level that they should have been at that time? But Johnny Gargano, through this weekend and through this night, that I looked ahead just to make sure I was not speaking out of turn here, there was something very deliberate about how Gabe Sapolsky treated Johnny Gargano, at least at BB King's. And it's something that, at the end of the day, I feel like it was a success. But during the time, and looking at it also as how Ronin has been treated, kind of something that's okay, Rich Swan's getting beat up a lot. Chuck Taylor's out this weekend, but he's not really treated as someone at the level of the same time. But Johnny Gargano feels like that he's on the ascent. And I feel like that was something that was done pretty well. And that is the second anniversary show, Enter the Dragon 2011. Okay, so we are now 2 years through this promotion. We're entering year 3. We think that things aren't, that there's not a rosy ending coming anytime soon. But this show made me feel a lot better about this triple shot weekend.
It's a really fun show. It's long. I think it's the longest show to date. It clocks in at almost 3 hours, which, given how few matches there are on it, it's, again, matches could have been shorter. But it's a fun show. It's clearly the highlight of this triple shot weekend. And if I do my math correctly, which, granted, there's a good chance I didn't, but I believe next week's episode marks the halfway point of us covering Dragon Gate USA. Again, could be wrong. We'll need Mike to double check at some point, but I believe next week is the halfway point of this promotion.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, at least, again, there's not as many solid records about this, both all the iPay-per-views and the DVD things. I believe we are at that halfway point. Dragon Gate USA will not make it to its 5th birthday, so we only have 2 more birthdays left, which is kind of wild to think. So. But
before we throw dirt on the promotion, we do have Chasing the Dragon 2011 from my hometown in Indianapolis, Illinois. This will be covered next week. A show that features the debut of The Scene, Caleb Conley and Scott Reed, as well as the debut of Uhaa Nation. Also on the card, Eric Cannon versus John Davis, an open invitational elimination match featuring BJ Whitmer, Billy Rock, Sugar Dunkerton, Flip Kendrick, Mike Seidel, not Matt Seidel, but Mike Seidel, and Brody Lee, Naruki Doi versus Sami Callihan, Lewis Linden versus Pinkie Sanchez, Chuck Taylor and Johnny Gargano against the officially formed unit of Junction 3 and Masato Yoshino and Yamato, and a 6-man tag Captain's Fall match with Pac and Rich Swann representing Junction 3 as well as AR Fox against the Blood Warriors trio of Shima, Ricochet, and Akira Tozawa.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments in DGUSA history happens DG history happens before this next show. So, Case, I think we've pretty much covered this all we have to. Is there anything else you want to hit on before we get out of here?
Mike, I think we've covered Enter the Dragon 2011 better than anybody else ever will.
Yeah, I did not realize our runtime was going to go this late tonight, but oh well, that happens. So you could follow us on Twitter. The podcast account is at Open VoiceGate. I am at Fujiheya. That's with 2 eyes, like Don Fuji. Case is at _in your case. If you're on the Apple Podcast app, feel free to rate and review. Please 5 stars. And that's going to do it for Case. I'm Mike, and we'll be back with you next week as we're going into Low Country for Chasing the Dragon 2011. Take care, everyone.